Hello everyone. Today, Biker Justice Analyst bring you a story full of humanity and compassion. Enjoy listening.
Poor single dad let a lost girl stay the night the next day. 50 Hell's Angel show up at his house. Charlie Hayes wiped the grease from his hands with a worn red shop rag and glanced at the clock on the wall. 5:30. Time to close up. Dark clouds were gathering outside the garage bay doors, and the wind had picked up considerably since lunch. "Better get moving before this storm hits," he muttered to himself, doing one final walkthrough of the shop. He checked that all the tools were put away and the equipment was properly shut down, habits ingrained from years of running his own business. The first fat drops of rain started falling as Charlie climbed into his old Ford pickup. The leather seat creaked beneath him, familiar and comfortable after all these years. He turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life, a sound he knew as well as his own heartbeat. The drive to the Miller's house, where Sophie was playing with her friend Jenny, usually took 10 minutes. Today, with the threatening weather, Charlie made it in 8. He pulled up to the tidy white house just as Mrs. Miller was ushering both girls in from the backyard. "Perfect timing," Mrs. Miller called out, waving from the covered porch. "Sophie, honey, your dad's here." Sophie came bounding down the steps, her brown ponytail bouncing with each jump. Charlie's heart warmed at the sight of her smile, the same smile her mother had worn. She clutched a piece of paper in her hand, protecting it from the increasing rainfall. "Dad, look what I made!" Sophie scrambled into the truck, immediately shoving the drawing in front of Charlie's face. "It's us at the beach. See? That's you building a sandcastle with me." Charlie studied the crayon masterpiece, taking in the stick figures and wobbly waves. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. We'll put it right on the fridge when we get home." He turned to wave goodbye to Mrs. Miller. "Thanks for watching her today." The storm was picking up now, rain drumming steadily on the truck's roof as they drove home. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder that made Sophie jump slightly. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story." "You okay there, kiddo?" Charlie asked, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Yeah," Sophie nodded bravely. "I just don't like the loud ones." "Me neither," Charlie admitted with a gentle smile. "How about we make some hot chocolate when we get home? Perfect weather for it." Sophie's face lit up. "With marshmallows? Is there any other way?" Their small house welcomed them with familiar comfort, a modest 2-bedroom that Charlie had worked hard to maintain over the years. While Sophie changed into her pajamas, Charlie moved around the kitchen, heating milk on the stove and pulling out their favorite mugs. After hot chocolate and a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches, Charlie helped Sophie with her math homework. The storm outside grew fiercer, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the trees. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Charlie said, checking his watch. "Go brush your teeth, and I'll come tuck you in." Sophie hugged him tight before heading to the bathroom. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, baby girl." Once Sophie was settled under her covers, Charlie read her favorite chapter from Charlotte's Web. The familiar story and her father's steady voice soon had her drifting off to sleep. Charlie kissed her forehead and quietly closed her door. He had just settled onto the couch with a cup of coffee, ready to look over some invoices from the shop, when he heard it, 3 soft but urgent knocks at the front door. Frowning, Charlie set down his coffee and walked to the entrance. Who could be out in weather like this? He opened the door to find a teenage girl standing on his porch, completely drenched. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and she was shivering, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were wide with fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I need help." Charlie hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. "Come in, come in," he said softly, careful not to raise his voice and wake Sophie. The girl crossed the threshold, her shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor, leaving small puddles in her wake. "Let me get you a towel." Charlie hurried to the linen closet, grabbing their fluffiest bath towel. When he returned, the girl stood exactly where he'd left her, arms still wrapped tightly around herself, water dripping steadily from her clothes. "Here." He handed her the towel, watching as she took it with trembling hands. "I'm Charlie Hayes." "Emma," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She pressed the towel to her face, then started drying her hair. "You must be freezing, Emma. Wait here." Charlie disappeared down the hallway again, this time heading to Sophie's room. He carefully opened her dresser, selecting a pair of sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt his daughter sometimes slept in. They weren't ideal, but they'd be better than soaked clothes. When he returned, Emma had managed to stop shivering, though her clothes still clung to her like a second skin. "The bathroom's down the hall, first door on the right," he said, offering her the dry clothes. "Change into these. I'll make some hot cocoa." Emma nodded, clutching the clothes to her chest as she made her way to the bathroom. Charlie busied himself in the kitchen, heating milk and adding cocoa powder, trying not to wonder too much about what kind of trouble would drive a teenage girl out into a storm like this. The bathroom door opened just as he was adding marshmallows to the mug. Emma emerged looking younger in Sophie's clothes, her wet hair combed back from her face. She'd rolled up the sweatpants at the ankles, but the t-shirt hung loose on her thin frame. "Thank you," she said, accepting the steaming mug Charlie offered. She took a small sip, then another larger one. "Want to tell me what brings you out on a night like this?" Charlie asked, keeping his tone gentle. Emma's fingers tightened around the mug. "I'm just trying to get away from some trouble." Her eyes darted to the window where lightning flashed, illuminating the rain-slicked street. "I can't really say more than that." Charlie nodded slowly. He recognized the look in her eyes, a cornered animal, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "Okay," he said simply. "You can sleep on the couch tonight. I'll get you some blankets." Relief flooded Emma's face. She sank onto the couch while Charlie gathered bedding from the closet. When he returned, she had finished the cocoa and set the empty mug on the coffee table. "Try to get some rest," Charlie said, handing her the blankets. "We can figure things out in the morning." Emma arranged the blankets around herself, curling into a tight ball at one end of the couch. Charlie moved to the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to peer out at the storm-dark street. Nothing moved out there except the rain and wind-whipped trees. A particularly loud crack of thunder made him turn. Emma had pulled the blanket up to her chin, her eyes closed, but her body tense. Charlie quietly walked down the hall to check on Sophie, finding her still sound asleep, one arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed elephant. Back in the living room, Charlie settled into his armchair. Emma's breathing had evened out, though her face wasn't entirely peaceful. Outside, the storm continued its assault, and Charlie kept his vigil, watching over both girls as the night grew deeper, wondering what the morning light would reveal. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm patches on the worn linoleum floor. Charlie stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while keeping one eye on Emma, who was still asleep on the couch. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, clean smell that drifted in through the slightly opened window. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice came from the hallway, still fuzzy with sleep. She padded into the kitchen in her purple pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "I smelled pancakes and—" She stopped short when she spotted Emma on the couch. Charlie put a finger to his lips. "We have a guest," he whispered. "Her name is Emma. She needed a place to stay last night because of the storm." Sophie's eyes widened with curiosity. She tiptoed closer to the couch, studying Emma's sleeping form. At that moment, Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She tensed for a second before remembering where she was. "Hi," Sophie said brightly. "Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes the best ones." Emma sat up slowly, managing a small smile. Yes, I do. Thank you." "Come on," Sophie said, grabbing Emma's hand without hesitation. "You can sit next to me." Charlie watched as his daughter led Emma to the kitchen table, chattering about her favorite pancake toppings. There was something both heartwarming and unsettling about the scene. Sophie's innocent acceptance of this stranger, and Emma's careful way of moving, like someone used to watching their back. "Here we go," Charlie said, placing a stack of pancakes on the table. "Butter's in the fridge, Sophie. Can you grab the syrup, too?" Sophie bounced to the refrigerator while Emma sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked younger in the morning light, more vulnerable. "Did you sleep okay?" Charlie asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Emma nodded. "Yes, thank you. I should probably get going after breakfast." "Where are you headed?" Charlie couldn't help asking, even as part of him hoped she would indeed move on quickly. Having a runaway teenager in his house complicated things he couldn't even begin to imagine. "I'm not sure yet," Emma admitted, accepting the syrup Sophie handed her. "You could stay and play with me," Sophie suggested, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "I have lots of games and we could—" "Sophie," Charlie said gently, "Emma probably has places to be." But watching Emma pick at her pancakes, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight, Charlie felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Whatever she was running from, she was just a kid herself. The peaceful breakfast was interrupted by a sound that made Emma's fork clatter against her plate. In the distance, growing louder by the second, came the unmistakable rumble of motorcycles, not just one or two, but many. Charlie rose from his chair and walked to the front window. The rumbling grew louder, like approaching thunder. Emma stood frozen by the table, her face drained of color. "Stay inside," Charlie told them, his voice firm but calm. He stepped out onto his front porch, closing the door behind him. The sound was deafening now. As Charlie watched, motorcycle after motorcycle turned onto his quiet street. Leather-clad riders filled his vision, 50 of them at least, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. The Hells Angels patches on their jackets stood out clearly as they pulled up in front of his house, their engines idling with a menacing growl. Charlie's heart pounded as he faced the wall of leather-clad bikers. Their leader, a tall man with flame-red hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. A nasty scar ran down the left side of his face, pulling his mouth into a permanent sneer. "Name's Rusty Stevens," he said, his voice carrying across the front yard. "We're looking for Emma Sullivan. We know she's here." Charlie planted his feet firmly on the porch. "This is private property. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave." Rusty's laugh was like gravel. "Listen, friend, that girl in there? She's caused a lot of trouble. We just want to talk to her." Through the window, Charlie caught a glimpse of Emma's face. She had pressed herself against the wall, trembling. Sophie stood next to her, clutching her hand. "I don't care what you want," Charlie said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You're not coming in my house." Several bikers revved their engines, the sound echoing off the surrounding houses. Neighbors were beginning to peek through their curtains. Charlie knew he should probably call the police, but something in Emma's terrified expression made him hesitate. "You don't understand what you're getting into," Rusty said, taking another step forward. His boots crunched on the gravel. "That girl belongs with us. Her daddy had some unfinished business, and she's the key to settling it." Charlie crossed his arms. "She doesn't belong to anyone." Inside, Emma had sunk to the floor, her breathing rapid and shallow. Sophie looked scared, but stayed by her side, patting her shoulder awkwardly. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," Rusty growled. "Your choice." Charlie stood his ground. "How about this? You all stay out here, and I'll talk to Emma. That's the only way this is happening." Rusty's eyes narrowed as he considered the offer. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded. 5 minutes, then we do things my way." Charlie went back inside, locking the door behind him. He found Emma in the living room, her face buried in her hands. "Sophie, honey," he said gently, "go to your room and shut the door, okay?" Once Sophie was gone, Charlie knelt beside Emma. "I need you to tell me what's going on. Who are these people?" Emma lifted her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "That man out there, Rusty, he was my father's second in command." Her voice shook. "My dad was Tony Sullivan. They called him the Snake." Charlie's stomach dropped. Everyone knew that name. Tony Sullivan had been one of the most notorious Hells Angels leaders in the region until his death in a police raid 2 weeks ago. "Dad kept records," Emma continued, her words tumbling out. "Everything the gang did, everyone they hurt, all the money they made. He was paranoid about being betrayed, so he documented everything. Rusty, he thinks I know where those records are." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But I don't. I swear I don't. I just couldn't stay there anymore. After Dad died, Rusty started talking about how I belonged to the gang now, how I had to take my father's place. I couldn't become that." Through the window, they could see the bikers waiting, their presence like a dark cloud over the house. Rusty paced back and forth, checking his watch. Charlie ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation crushing down on him. He had to make a decision, and fast. Charlie stared at Emma, his mind reeling from the revelation. Tony the Snake Sullivan wasn't just any gang member. He'd been a legend in the criminal underworld, his name whispered in fear across 3 states. "I should have told you sooner," Emma said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "But I was scared. Everyone who knows who I am either wants something from me or wants to hurt me." Through the window, the morning sun cast long shadows of the bikers across Charlie's front lawn. The rumble of their idling motorcycles filled the air like distant thunder. "My dad," Emma's voice cracked. "He wasn't a good person. The things he did." She shook her head. "I grew up watching him hurt people. He said it was business, but I knew better. When the police finally caught up to him, part of me was relieved." Charlie sank into his armchair, trying to process everything. His eyes darted to Sophie's bedroom door, where his daughter was hopefully staying put, as he'd asked. "After the shooting, Rusty started talking about legacy," Emma continued. "He said I had to step up, take my father's place. But that's not who I am." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "Dad kept detailed records of everything, every crime, every deal, every dollar. Rusty thinks I know where they are." "Do you?" Charlie asked quietly. Emma shook her head. "No. Dad never trusted anyone completely, not even me. But Rusty won't believe that." A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. "Time's up!" Rusty's voice boomed from outside. Charlie stood, squaring his shoulders. He looked at Emma, saw the terror in her eyes, and made his decision. "Stay here," he said firmly. He walked back outside, closing the door behind him. Rusty stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his scarred face twisted in impatience. "Well?" Rusty demanded. "Hand her over." Charlie crossed his arms. "No, she's not going anywhere with you." Rusty's face darkened. "You don't want to make an enemy of us, friend. That girl belongs with her family." "Family doesn't force someone to become something they're not," Charlie said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Some of the bikers shifted on their motorcycles, hands moving to their jackets. The threat was clear, but Charlie held his ground. "You've got no idea what you're getting into," Rusty snarled. "That girl's father—" "I know exactly who her father was," Charlie cut in. "And I know who she is. She's not him." Rusty studied Charlie for a long moment, then let out a harsh laugh. "You're either very brave or very stupid." He pulled out a phone, made a show of checking the time. "Tell you what, you've got 24 hours to reconsider. Hand her over by this time tomorrow, or things are going to get real unpleasant for you and that little girl of yours." Charlie's fists clenched at the mention of Sophie, but he kept his voice level. "Get off my property." Rusty smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. 24 hours, he repeated. He turned to his men. "Mount up." The roar of engines filled the air as the bikers started their motorcycles. Rusty kept his eyes locked on Charlie as he backed toward his bike. "Clock's ticking," he called out over the noise. Then he swung onto his motorcycle and led his men away, leaving behind only the acrid smell of exhaust and a heavy blanket of fear. Charlie watched until the last bike disappeared around the corner, knowing with absolute certainty that this was far from over. Charlie drummed his fingers on the steering wheel as he watched Sophie walk into school. Her pink backpack bounced with each step, and she turned to wave goodbye one last time. His heart squeezed. She looked so small, so vulnerable. The drive to work felt longer than usual. Main Street was alive with morning traffic, but something was different. People who usually waved now quickly looked away. Mrs. Peterson, who always smiled from her flower shop, hurried inside when she saw his truck approaching. Charlie pulled into Johnson's auto shop, where he'd worked for the past 12 years. The familiar smell of motor oil and rubber usually brought comfort, but today it just made his stomach churn. "Hayes!" Bob Johnson's voice boomed across the garage. "My office, now." Charlie's coveralls felt heavy as he followed his boss into the small office cluttered with invoices and car manuals. Bob settled into his creaking chair, his usually friendly face stern. "Town's talking, Charlie," Bob said, cutting straight to the chase. 50 Hell's Angels showed up at your house yesterday? What's that about?" Charlie shifted in his seat. "It's complicated, Bob." "Uncomplicated." Bob leaned forward. "Look, you're my best mechanic. Never missed a day, never complained. But I got customers calling, saying they don't feel safe bringing their cars here with gang connections." "There are no gang connections," Charlie protested. "I'm helping someone who needs it." "Maybe so." Bob sighed, rubbing his temples. "But perception is reality in a small town. I got a business to run. Either this situation gets resolved, or—" He left the threat hanging. The rest of Charlie's workday crawled by in a fog of dirty looks and whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by. Even Ted, who'd worked beside him for years, kept his distance. When Charlie finally got home with Sophie, the house smelled amazing. He found Emma in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She'd tied her dark hair back, and flour dusted her borrowed t-shirt. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly. "I wanted to do something to thank you. It's my grandmother's recipe for chicken and dumplings." Sophie bounced excitedly. "Emma let me help roll the dumplings." Charlie took in the scene, his kitchen counter dusted with flour, Sophie's face glowing with pride, Emma's nervous smile. Something warm settled in his chest, pushing back the day's worries. "Smells wonderful," he said, and Emma's smile grew more confident. They sat down to eat, and the food was better than anything Charlie had managed in years. Sophie chatted about school while Emma listened intently, asking questions about her teachers and friends. For a moment, it felt normal, like family. "This is really good," Charlie said, helping himself to seconds. "Your grandmother taught you well." Emma's eyes softened. "She was the only one who—" She paused, swallowing hard. She Showed me there was more to life than what my father wanted for me. Charlie watched as she helped Sophie wipe a spot of gravy from her chin, the gentle way she smiled at his daughter. This wasn't just some runaway anymore. This was a young woman trying to break free from a dark past, someone who could make his kitchen smell like home and make his daughter laugh. The weight of his boss's ultimatum still pressed on his shoulders, but watching Emma and Sophie clear the table together, he knew he couldn't turn her away. Some things were worth fighting for. The dishes clinked softly as Emma washed them, insisting on cleaning up after cooking. Charlie dried while Sophie worked on her homework at the kitchen table, her pencil scratching against paper. "You really don't have to do all this," Charlie said, stacking another clean plate. Emma shook her head. "It's the least I can do." She paused, her hands submerged in the soapy water. "You know, I used to dream about normal evenings like this, just doing dishes, talking about regular things." Charlie noticed her voice trembling slightly. "What other dreams did you have?" Emma's hands slowed their scrubbing. "I always wanted to be a nurse," she said quietly. "When I was little, before everything got really bad with Dad, I used to patch up the neighborhood kids' scraped knees." A small smile touched her lips. "I liked helping people feel better." Sophie looked up from her homework. "Like when you put a Band-Aid on my paper cut today?" "Yeah, exactly like that." Emma's smile grew warmer. "I actually started taking some night classes last year, basic stuff like biology. Kept it secret from Dad, of course." Her voice cracked. "I just wanted something different, you know? Something that matters." Charlie set down his dish towel. "That still matters. Those dreams aren't gone, Emma." "Aren't they?" Her hands gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white. "Look what I brought to your doorstep. All those men out there, the whole town talking." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Everything I touch turns toxic, just like his world." Sophie slid off her chair and wrapped her arms around Emma's waist. "Don't cry. You're not toxic. You made the best dinner ever." Emma's shoulders shook as she tried to hold back sobs. Charlie placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, the way he did when Sophie was upset. "Hey, listen to me. Your father's choices aren't yours. You're here because you're trying to break free, and that takes real courage." "I'm so tired," Emma whispered, wiping her eyes. "Tired of running, tired of being scared. I just want peace, a normal life. Maybe finish school, help people." She looked down at Sophie, still hugging her. "Have a real family someday." "You will," Charlie said firmly. "We'll figure this out, okay? One step at a time." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, Sophie eventually returning to her homework. After everything was clean, Emma helped Sophie pack her backpack for you tomorrow. "I think I'll head to bed if that's okay," Emma said, exhaustion clear in her voice. "Thank you. For everything. For listening." Charlie nodded. "Get some rest. Sophie, time for bed too, kiddo." After both girls had gone upstairs, Charlie stepped out onto his front porch. The night air was cool, carrying the lingering scent of rain. Several motorcycles were still parked down the street, their chrome gleaming under the streetlights. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he noticed one biker sitting apart from the others. The man was older, probably in his 60s, with gray hair and weathered features. Unlike the others who lounged aggressively on their bikes, this one sat quietly on a low wall, his attention fixed on Charlie's house. What caught Charlie's attention were the man's eyes. They weren't hard or threatening like the others. Even from this distance, there was something gentle about them, something that seemed at odds with his leather vest and gang patches. The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet street as Charlie walked toward his truck, pretending to check the tires. His eyes darted to the older biker who sat alone on the low brick wall, separate from his leather-clad brothers who lounged near their motorcycles further down the street. Charlie's heart hammered in his chest as he slowly made his way closer, keeping his movements casual. The older man watched him approach, his weathered face unreadable beneath his gray beard. "Morning," Charlie said, trying to keep his voice steady. He gestured to the wall. "Mind if I sit?" The biker, Rick Big Iron Walker, Charlie had heard the others call him, shifted slightly to make room. His leather vest creaked as he moved. Up close, Charlie could see the patches that marked decades of membership in the club, yet something in Rick's tired eyes spoke of weariness rather than menace. "Rough spot you've found yourself in," Rick said quietly, his voice gravelly but not unkind. He kept his gaze fixed on the street, speaking barely above a whisper. Charlie ran a hand through his hair. "Didn't exactly plan on any of this." "No one ever does?" Rick pulled out a pack of cigarettes, offering one to Charlie, who declined. "That girl in there, Emma. I knew her when she was just a little thing. Used to bring her candy sometimes, back when Tony would let people near her." "You knew her father?" Rick's face darkened. "Tony. The Snake Sullivan wasn't always the monster he became. Time was, he was just a brother who lost his way." He took a long drag on his cigarette. Watched him drag that girl deeper and deeper into the darkness. Couldn't do anything about it then. Charlie studied Rick's profile, noting how the man's hands trembled slightly. "And now?" "Now?" Rick's voice dropped even lower. "Now I'm just an old man who's seen too much. Been riding with these boys longer than most of them been alive." He gestured vaguely toward the other bikers. "But the club ain't what it used to be. Not since Rusty took over." A motorcycle roared to life down the street, making Charlie jump. Rick didn't flinch. "Listen," Rick said, still not looking at Charlie. "I can't be seen talking to you long, but that girl deserves better than what life handed her. Better than what we handed her." Charlie noticed Rick's hand moving slowly, deliberately reaching into his vest pocket. The older biker made a show of pulling out his cigarettes again, but as he did so, he pressed something into Charlie's palm. "Sometimes," Rick continued, his voice normal volume now, "a man's got to decide what side of history he wants to be on." He stood up, stretching as though their conversation had been nothing more than idle chat. Charlie waited until Rick had walked several paces away before glancing at the folded paper in his hand. Inside, written in cramped handwriting, was an address and 3 words. "Safe house. Trust no one else." When he looked up again, Rick had already merged back into the group of bikers, just another leather-clad figure among many. But Charlie noticed how the older man stood apart, even in the crowd, like a man carrying a heavy weight that only he could see. Back inside the house, Charlie carefully closed the door and pulled the curtains shut. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming nervously against a half-empty mug of coffee. Charlie pulled out the folded note and smoothed it flat on the worn wooden surface between them. 1247 Pine Creek Road, Emma read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at Charlie, her eyes clouded with doubt. "How can we trust him? He's one of them." Charlie pulled out a chair and sat down, the old wood creaking beneath his weight. "The way he talked about your father, about you, it was different. He remembered bringing you candy when you were little." Emma's fingers stopped drumming. Her face softened for a moment, then hardened again. "Lots of them brought me things back then. Doesn't mean they're good people." "No," Charlie agreed, "but Rick seems different. The way he stands apart from the others, the look in his eyes. He's tired of this life. I could see it." Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting shifting shadows across the note on the table. Emma reached out and traced the address with her finger. Pine Creek Road. That's on the other side of town, past the old mill. Charlie nodded. We'll wait until dark. I know a back route through the industrial area, less chance of being spotted. He glanced at his watch. We'll need to leave around 9. The guys watching the house usually switch shifts around then. There's always a few minutes of confusion we can use. And Sophie? Emma's voice cracked slightly. Mrs. Peterson next door can watch her. She's helped out before when I've had late shifts. Charlie ran a hand through his hair. I'll tell Sophie I have an emergency repair job. She's used to those. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, shrinking into the chair. I hate this. Hiding, running, putting your family at risk. Her voice trembled. Maybe I should just... Don't, Charlie cut her off firmly. Don't even think about giving yourself up. These men, he shook his head, they're not here to help you. They spent the next hour working out the details. Charlie would drive his old pickup, less conspicuous than his work truck. Emma would hide under blankets in the back seat. They mapped out alternate routes in case they were followed. Once you're at the safe house, Charlie said, I'll... A muffled sob from down the hall stopped him mid-sentence. Charlie's heart dropped as he recognized the sound. He exchanged a worried look with Emma before pushing back his chair. The short walk to Sophie's room felt endless. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap he could see his daughter sitting on her bed, hugging her stuffed elephant close to her chest. Her small shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Sophie? Charlie pushed the door open gently. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Sophie looked up at him, her cheeks wet with tears. Daddy, I'm scared, she whispered. Why are those scary men outside? Why won't they go away? Charlie's chest tightened as he crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed. Sophie immediately crawled into his lap, burying her face in his shirt like she used to do when she was younger. I don't understand, she hiccuped between sobs. Did we do something wrong? Are they going to hurt us? Charlie held her close, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. All his careful plans, all his attempts to shield her from what was happening, they hadn't been enough. His little girl was terrified, and he didn't know how to make it right. Charlie gathered Sophie closer, her small frame trembling against his chest. Her stuffed elephant was squished between them, damp with tears. He stroked her hair, the way he always did when she was upset, and waited until her breathing steadied. Look at me, sweetheart, he said softly. Sophie lifted her head, her eyes red and puffy. I need you to understand something very important. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. What? Sometimes, Charlie began, choosing his words carefully. Doing the right thing isn't easy. Remember when you stood up for Jenny at school when those bigger kids were being mean to her? Sophie nodded slowly. They started being mean to me, too. But you didn't back down, did you? You kept being her friend because it was the right thing to do. Charlie smiled, touching her chin gently. That's what we're doing now. Emma needs our help, just like Jenny needed yours. Because of those men outside? Sophie's voice quivered. Charlie nodded. They're not very nice people, but that's exactly why we have to help Emma get away from them. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared. Sophie clutched her elephant tighter. But what if... She bit her lip, fresh tears welling up. What if you have to go away, like Mommy did? The question hit Charlie like a physical blow. He pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, his own eyes stinging. Sophie Hayes listened to me very carefully. He leaned back so he could look directly into her eyes. I will never, ever leave you. Do you understand? Never. Promise. Her voice was small, uncertain. I promise with all my heart. Charlie held up his pinky finger. Pinky swear? A tiny smile flickered across Sophie's face as she linked her pinky with his. Pinky swear. They sat together for a while longer, Charlie rocking her gently until her breathing evened out and her grip on the elephant loosened. He told her stories about when she was little, about the time she tried to teach their cat to swim in the bathtub, about her first wobbly bike ride without training wheels. Gradually, her tears dried and her shoulders relaxed. Hours later, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep, Charlie stood in the darkened kitchen checking his watch. 8:55 p.m. Emma appeared silently beside him, wearing dark clothes and carrying a small backpack. "Mrs. Peterson's watching through her window," Charlie whispered. "She'll call if anything happens." Emma nodded, her face pale in the dim light. They moved through the house like shadows, avoiding the creaky floorboards they'd mapped out earlier. Charlie eased the back door open, wincing at the slight squeak of hinges. The night air was cool and damp. Charlie's pickup waited in the shadows behind the garage, positioned earlier for a quick getaway. They crouched low, moving between patches of darkness, hearts pounding with each distant motorcycle rumble. Finally, in the truck, Emma curled up under blankets in the back seat while Charlie started the engine. He backed out slowly, headlights off until they reached the street. As they pulled away from the house, he caught a glimpse of Mrs. Peterson's silhouette in her window, standing guard over his sleeping daughter. They wound through back streets, taking the long way around town. Neither spoke. The only sounds were the hum of tires on pavement and their tense breathing in the darkness. Charlie checked his mirrors constantly, looking for the telltale gleam of motorcycle headlights, but the roads remained empty. The headlights swept across weathered wood siding as Charlie's truck crept up the narrow dirt path. The cabin emerged from the darkness like a forgotten memory, its windows dark except for a single light glowing from within. Pine trees loomed overhead, their branches creaking in the night breeze. "This is it," Emma whispered from the back seat, pushing aside the blanket. Charlie double-checked the address on Rick's note. "Looks like it." They approached the cabin cautiously. Paint peeled from the wooden steps, and dead leaves cluttered the small porch. Charlie raised his hand to knock, but before his knuckles touched the door, it creaked open. A woman stood in the doorway, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore flannel pajamas and held a baseball bat casually at her side. Deep lines etched her face, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Rick sent you?" Her voice was rough, like she didn't use it much. Charlie nodded. "I'm Charlie Hayes. This is Emma." The woman studied them both, then lowered the bat. "Marla Walker, come in before someone sees you." The cabin's interior was small but tidy. A wood stove radiated warmth, and mismatched furniture created a cozy living space. Books filled several shelves, their spines worn with use. The whole place smelled of pine and coffee. "Rick's my brother," Marla explained, settling into an old armchair. "Haven't spoken to him in years, but he knows I help girls who want out." She fixed her gaze on Emma. "And you want out?" Emma stepped forward, chin raised. "More than anything." Marla nodded slowly. "Good. That's the first step, wanting it bad enough to leave everything behind." She gestured toward a narrow hallway. "There's a spare room back there. It's not much, but it's safe." "Thank you," Emma said softly. "Don't thank me yet." Marla's expression softened slightly. "The hard part's just starting, but we'll get through it." Charlie watched as Emma explored the small room, setting her backpack on the twin bed. The walls were bare except for a small window overlooking the woods. It wasn't much, but it was better than running. "I'll come check on you tomorrow," Charlie promised. "Maybe bring some of Sophie's books if you'd like?" Emma turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Charlie, She swallowed hard. Thank you for everything." Without warning, she hugged him tightly. Charlie hesitated for a moment before returning the embrace, remembering how young she really was. When they pulled apart, both pretended not to notice the other wiping their eyes. The drive home felt lighter somehow. Charlie rolled down his window, letting the cool night air clear his head. For the first time since Emma showed up on his doorstep, he felt like things might work out. The bikers would eventually give up and move on. Emma would be safe. Life would return to normal. He smiled, thinking of Sophie sleeping peacefully at home. Maybe he'd make pancakes in the morning, her favorite breakfast. They could talk about having Emma over sometimes, once things settled down. It wouldn't be easy, but they'd figure it out. Charlie turned onto his street, that small spark of hope warming his chest. But as he rounded the final corner, the spark flickered and died. His house was dark, too dark, even Mrs. Peterson's porch light was out. Charlie's hand trembled as he turned his key in the lock. The street behind him was too quiet, unnaturally dark with all the nearby porch lights mysteriously off. His fingers found the light switch inside, but nothing happened when he flipped it. The beam of his phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a nightmare. Picture frames lay, shattered on the floor. The couch cushions had been slashed open, their stuffing scattered like snow across the carpet. In the kitchen, drawers hung open, their contents spilled across the counters. "Sophie?" His voice cracked as he called out. "Sophie, honey, are you here?" Only silence answered. Charlie raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time. His heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. Sophie's bedroom door was ajar, and he pushed it open with shaking hands. Her room was destroyed. Books torn from shelves, clothes pulled from drawers, her small desk overturned. But what made his blood run cold was Mr. Whiskers, Sophie's favorite stuffed rabbit, sitting in the center of her stripped bed. A piece of paper had been pinned to its chest with a switchblade. Charlie yanked the knife free and grabbed the note with trembling fingers. The words, written in harsh black marker, blurred before his eyes. "You took something of ours. We took something of yours." His knees gave out, and he sank onto Sophie's bed, clutching Mr. Whiskers to his chest. The stuffed rabbit still smelled like Sophie's strawberry shampoo. Charlie's mind raced through possibilities. Mrs. Peterson next door. She was watching Sophie. She must have Sophie. He stumbled down the stairs and out the front door, nearly falling in his rush to reach his neighbor's house. His fists pounded on her door until lights finally flickered on inside. "Mrs. Peterson, please, is Sophie with you?" The elderly woman opened her door, blinking in confusion. "Charlie? What's wrong?" "Sophie, is she here? Please tell me she's here." Mrs. Peterson's face creased with worry. "No, I haven't seen her since yesterday. Wasn't she at school today?" School. Of course, she had to be at school. Charlie mumbled a quick thanks and ran back to his truck, hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The digital clock on his dashboard read 11:47 p.m. The drive to Sophie's elementary school was a blur. Charlie ran every red light, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. The school parking lot was empty and dark, but he pulled up to the front entrance anyway. Inside the truck, Charlie's fingers fumbled with his phone as he pulled up the school's contact information. The night security guard answered on the third ring. "This is Charlie Hayes," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "My daughter Sophie, I need to know if she made it to school this morning." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Let me check the attendance records. Hayes, Sophie?" "No, sir. She was marked absent today. Never arrived." The phone slipped from Charlie's numb fingers. Through the windshield, he stared at the empty school building, its dark windows reflecting nothing but his own desperate face. The note's words echoed in his mind. You took something of ours. We took something of yours. Sophie was gone, and it was all his fault. Charlie sat in his truck, staring at his phone. His hands wouldn't stop shaking as he dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice felt like a lifeline in the darkness. "My daughter's been kidnapped," he said, his voice breaking. "The Hells Angels. They took her." Within 20 minutes, 2 police cars pulled up to the school parking lot, their red and blue lights cutting through the night. Officer Martinez, a young cop with kind eyes, took notes while Charlie explained everything. Emma showing up at his door, the biker's arrival, the ransacked house, and the threatening note. "Mr. Hayes," Officer Martinez said carefully, "we understand your concern, but dealing with the Hells Angels is complicated. They operate across state lines, and we'd need federal involvement to—" "Complicated?" Charlie's voice rose. "My 8-year-old daughter is missing. What's complicated about that?" The second officer, an older man named Thompson, stepped forward. "Sir, we'll file the report and put out an APB, but you need to understand, these guys have lawyers, connections. We can't just storm in without solid evidence." Charlie watched them drive away, their promises to look into it ringing hollow in his ears. He slumped against his truck, despair washing over him. The police weren't going to help. Not really. Not in time. His fingers found Rick's number on the crumpled note in his pocket. It was nearly midnight, but Charlie didn't hesitate. The phone rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Rick," Charlie choked out. "They took Sophie. Please, I need your help." There was a long pause on the other end. "Where are you?" "School parking lot. I can't think straight." "Stay there. 10 minutes." True to his word, Rick's motorcycle rumbled into the lot 8 minutes later. The older biker's weathered face was grim in the streetlight as he dismounted. "Tell me everything," he said. Charlie explained about taking Emma to the safe house, coming home to find the place destroyed, the note, Sophie's absence from school. His words tumbled out, raw and desperate. Rick listened silently, his expression darkening. When Charlie finished, the older man rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Rusty's getting bold. Taking a kid, that's crossing a line even for him." "Can you help me get her back?" Charlie pleaded. "I can try," Rick said slowly. "But you need to understand something. This isn't just about Sophie anymore. Rusty won't stop until he gets what he wants." "Emma," Charlie whispered. Rick nodded. "The only way to end this clean is for Emma to come back and face them. Whatever she knows, whatever they think she has, it needs to be dealt with." "But she'll be killed." "Not necessarily." Rick's eyes were steady. "I still have some pull with the old guard. If we do this right, maybe we can protect both of them, but Emma has to be willing." Charlie thought of Emma at the safe house, finally feeling secure after weeks of running. He thought of Sophie, alone and terrified, probably crying for her, Dad. His chest ached with the weight of it all. "I'll talk to her," he said finally. "But I need your word. You'll help protect both of them." Rick extended his hand. "You have it, but we need to move fast. Dawn's coming, and Rusty isn't known for his patience." Charlie gripped the offered hand like a drowning man clutching a rope. It wasn't much, but it was hope, and right now, that was all he had. The safe house looked different in the darkness. Charlie's headlights swept across the weathered wooden boards as he pulled up the narrow dirt road. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, Rick's motorcycle rumbling behind him. Inside, Emma was curled up on a faded armchair, reading a book by lamplight. Her face lit up when she saw Charlie, but the smile died instantly when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked, standing up. Charlie's voice was raw. "They took Sophie." Emma stumbled backward like she'd been struck. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She sank back into the chair, hands covering her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Marla appeared from the kitchen, her face tight with concern. Rick stayed by the door, a silent guardian. "This is my fault," Emma said, her voice breaking. "All my fault. I never should have stayed with you. I should have kept running." Charlie knelt beside her chair. "Emma, listen to me. This isn't your fault. These men, they're the ones who chose to take an innocent child." "But they took her because of me." Emma stood up, pacing the small room. Her hands were shaking. "Because I ran. Because I couldn't face what happened with my father." She stopped suddenly, turning to face Charlie. "I have to go back." "Emma, no," Marla started. "I have to." Emma cut her off. "Sophie is 8 years old. She's probably terrified." She looked at Charlie, her eyes full of determination, despite the tears. "You took me in when I had nowhere else to go. You protected me. Now it's my turn to protect your daughter." Rick stepped forward. "It won't be easy. Rusty's angry, and he's convinced you know something about your father's last deals." "I don't care what he thinks," Emma said. "I won't let Sophie suffer for my mistakes." Charlie watched the young woman who'd shown up on his doorstep just days ago, soaking wet and scared. Now she stood straight-backed, facing her fears head-on. His heart swelled with a mixture of pride and worry. "I'm coming with you," he said. Emma nodded, then turned to Marla. "Can I have some paper? There's something I need to write." Marla brought her a notepad and pen. Emma sat at the kitchen table, bent over the paper. Her hand moved quickly, tears occasionally dropping onto the page. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and handed it to Marla. If something happens to me," Emma said quietly, "could you make sure this gets to my aunt in Oregon? She's the only family I have left who isn't mixed up in all this." Marla pulled her into a tight hug. "You come back. You hear me? Both of you." Rick cleared his throat. "We should go. I know where they'll be holding Sophie, the old compound outside town." Emma wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. She looked at Charlie, and in that moment they shared an understanding. They were in this together now, bound by something stronger than fear. "Let's bring Sophie home," Emma said. They walked out into the cool night air, leaving the safety of Marla's cabin behind. The moon hung low and full above the trees as they made their way to Charlie's truck. Whatever waited for them at the compound, there was no turning back now. The old compound loomed before them, a sprawling warehouse with boarded windows and rusted metal siding. Dozens of motorcycles lined the gravel lot, their chrome gleaming under the security lights. Charlie's truck came to a stop, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. "You ready?" Charlie asked, his voice gentle. Emma nodded, though her hands were trembling. "As I'll ever be." They stepped out into the cool night air. Rick was already there, having arrived ahead of them on his bike. He gave them a grim nod and led them toward the entrance, where 2 burly bikers stood guard. "They're expected," Rick told the guards. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of wooden crates and old machinery. The air smelled of oil and cigarette smoke. Music thumped from somewhere deeper in the building, and voices echoed off the high ceiling. They found Rusty in what looked like a makeshift office, a cleared space with a desk and some chairs. Sophie sat in a corner, hugging her knees. When she saw Charlie, her eyes lit up. "Daddy!" she cried out. Charlie started forward, but one of Rusty's men blocked his path. Sophie's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her arms. "Well, well," Rusty drawled, leaning back in his chair. His red beard caught the fluorescent light. "The prodigal daughter returns." Emma stepped forward, her chin high despite her fear. "Let Sophie go, Rusty. She has nothing to do with this." "Oh, but she does now." Rusty stood up, circling his desk. "See, your daddy, rest his soul, left quite a mess behind. Money, documents, things that could cause a lot of trouble for certain people. He stopped in front of Emma. And you're going to tell me where he hid it all. I don't know anything about... Emma started. Rusty slammed his hand on the desk, making Sophie jump. Don't lie to me. Tony wouldn't have gone down without insurance, and you were his precious little girl, his only heir. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He must have told you something. Charlie watched Sophie trembling in the corner, his heart breaking. Please, he said, just let my daughter go. Rusty turned to him, considering. Simple deal. Emma tells me where Tony's stash is, and the kid goes home with Daddy. Everyone wins. Emma's mind raced. Her father had never told her about any stash, but she remembered him being especially secretive in the weeks before his death. He'd spent hours in his study, making calls, moving papers around. If I tell you, Emma said carefully, you'll let them both go? Charlie and Sophie? Emma, no, Charlie started. You have my word, Rusty cut in. The location for their freedom. Emma looked at Sophie, then at Charlie. She saw the worry in his eyes, the same protective concern he'd shown when he first opened his door to her on that stormy night. She took a deep breath. I know where it is, she lied. But it's not something I can just tell you. I need to take you there. Rusty's eyes narrowed. You think I'm stupid enough to let you lead us on a wild goose chase? It's hidden well, Emma insisted. You'd never find it without me. But she glanced at the dark windows. It's too late tonight. We need daylight to find the markers. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant music. Rusty studied Emma's face, looking for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow morning then, first light. He pointed at Charlie and Sophie. They stay here until we get back with the stash. No, Emma said firmly. Sophie goes home with Charlie tonight. That's the deal, or I tell you nothing. More silence. Rusty drummed his fingers on the desk, then waved his hand. Fine, take the kid. But Charlie stays, insurance that you'll come back. Emma looked at Charlie apologetically. He gave her a slight nod, understanding passing between them. Deal, Emma said. Rusty motioned to one of his men. Take the kid out to her father's truck. Sophie scrambled to her feet, her small shoulders shaking. The biker, a tall man with tattoos covering his arms, reached for her, but Charlie stepped forward. I'll take her, he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. Rusty shrugged. Fine, but remember our deal. You come right back, Hayes. Charlie hurried to Sophie, scooping her into his arms. She buried her face in his neck, her tears warm against his skin. He held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, and carried her through the warehouse. The night air hit them like a blessing. Stars dotted the sky above, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees surrounding the compound. Charlie's old pickup truck sat where he'd left it, a symbol of the normal life that seemed so far away now. He set Sophie down next to the passenger door, kneeling to look her in the eyes. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was trying to be brave, just like always. Did they hurt you, sweetheart? Charlie asked, checking her arms and face for any signs of injury. Sophie shook her head. No, they just scared me. Her lower lip trembled. But I knew you'd come, Daddy. I knew you wouldn't leave me. Charlie pulled her into another hug, his own eyes welling up. Never. I will never leave you, Sophie. You're my whole world. But, Sophie pulled back, looking worried. You have to go back in there? Charlie nodded slowly. Just for a little while longer. Emma needs help, and we don't leave people who need help, remember? Like when you helped Mrs. Peterson's cat out of the tree? Sophie asked, a ghost of a smile appearing. Exactly like that, Charlie said, managing a small laugh. But I promise you, this will all be over soon. Everything's going to be okay. He helped Sophie into the truck and buckled her seatbelt. As he started the engine, he could see Emma watching from one of the warehouse windows, her face pale in the darkness. She raised her hand in a small wave to Sophie, who waved back. The drive home was quiet, with Sophie eventually falling asleep against the window. Charlie carried her inside their house, which still showed signs of the earlier ransacking, papers scattered, furniture askew. But none of that mattered now. Sophie was safe. He took her upstairs to her bedroom, which thankfully had been left mostly untouched. The familiar sight of her stuffed animals and colorful bedspread brought a lump to his throat. How close had he come to losing all this? Charlie tucked Sophie into bed, pulling her favorite purple blanket up to her chin. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. He sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight. A shadow moved across the bedroom wall. Charlie tensed, then relaxed as he recognized the silhouette at the window. Rick stood on the back porch roof, gesturing for Charlie to come outside. Charlie leaned down, kissed Sophie's forehead, and quietly made his way to the window. Charlie climbed carefully through the window onto the porch roof, his boots finding solid footing on the worn shingles. Rick stood in the shadows, his weathered face half hidden beneath his graying beard. "The kid okay?" Rick asked softly. "Yeah, shaken up, but she's strong." Charlie crossed his arms against the night chill. "What are you doing here? I thought you couldn't be seen helping us." Rick glanced around before pulling something from his leather jacket, a folded piece of paper, yellow with age. Tony Sullivan wasn't always the monster people made him out to be. Near the end, something changed in him. Charlie took the paper, unfolding it carefully. In the dim light from Sophie's window, he could make out what looked like a hand-drawn map. 2 weeks before the police raid, Rick continued, his voice barely above a whisper, Tony called me to his place. He knew things were closing in. Said he'd been watching Emma, seeing how much she hated the life he'd brought her into. Rick's eyes grew distant. He gave me this map and made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd use what was hidden there to help Emma disappear. Charlie studied the crude drawings on the paper. "This is real? The location of the stash everyone's looking for?" Rick nodded. Tony may have been a criminal, but he loved his daughter. Said the money wasn't worth Emma being trapped in this life forever. He pointed to markings on the map. "It's in an old mining tunnel about 30 miles north. There's enough cash there to give Emma a fresh start somewhere far away." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Charlie's voice had an edge to it. "Had to be sure I could trust you," Rick said. "Needed to know you weren't just looking to cash in on Tony's fortune. The way you protected Sophie, the risks you took for Emma, that's when I knew you were different." Charlie folded the map, his mind racing. "We still have to deal with Rusty. He's expecting Emma to take them to the stash tomorrow." "That's why I'm here now." Rick moved closer, speaking urgently. "We can get there first, tonight, but we have to move fast." Charlie glanced back through the window at Sophie's sleeping form. "I can't leave her alone again." "My sister Marla can watch her," Rick offered. "She's good with kids, and no one would think to look for Sophie there." Charlie ran a hand through his hair, weighing the options. Finally, he nodded. "Let me wake her and pack a few things." 20 minutes later, they were in Rick's truck, heading toward Marla's cabin. Emma sat between them, clutching the map in trembling hands. "I can't believe he did this," she whispered, tracing the lines on the paper. "All those years, I thought he didn't care what happened to me." "People can surprise you," Rick said gently. "Sometimes they just figure it out too late." Emma looked up, her jaw set with determination. "We can use this. When Rusty comes tomorrow, I'll tell him I'll only reveal the location if he agrees to let me go, and to leave Charlie and Sophie alone. It's dangerous, Charlie warned. Rusty's not known for keeping his word. No, Emma agreed, but he is known for being greedy, and this way he gets what he wants without any more trouble. Clean break, everyone walks away. Rick nodded slowly. It could work. Rusty's been under pressure from the other chapters. A big score like this would secure his position, might be worth more to him than revenge. Charlie watched the dark road ahead, thinking of Sophie safe at Marla's cabin. One way or another, this had to end, for all their sakes. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as they drove deeper into the desert. Emma sat quietly between Charlie and Rick, watching the endless stretch of sand and scrub brush roll past. The map lay in her lap, its edges worn smooth from her fingers, tracing the route over and over. The gentle bumping of the truck brought back memories she'd tried so hard to forget. Nights spent in the back of her father's motorcycle, clutching his leather jacket as they roared through similar landscapes. The cold desert air stinging her face, the rumble of other bikes around them, a childhood spent among steel and thunder. "You okay?" Charlie asked softly, noticing her distant look. Emma nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just remembering. We used to ride out here all the time, Dad and his crew. Sometimes they'd have these big parties in the desert." She swallowed hard. "I hated those nights. Too much drinking, too many fights." Rick's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Tony changed in those last few months. Started talking about getting out, making things right." "Really?" Emma's voice was small, hopeful. "He never said anything to me." "Pride, maybe? Shame?" Rick guided the truck around a sharp bend. Hard for a man to admit to his kid that he messed up their whole life. Emma stared out at the dark shapes of cacti passing by. "I used to dream about running away. Every birthday, every Christmas, I'd wish for a normal life, a real home." She glanced at Charlie. "Like what you gave Sophie." Charlie's throat tightened. "Everyone deserves that chance, Emma." The truck bounced over rougher terrain as they left the main road. Rick switched on the high beams, illuminating a narrow trail that wound between rocky outcrops. Emma studied the map, comparing landmarks. "My earliest memory," she said suddenly, "is hiding under my bed during a raid. I was maybe 4. The police were shouting, bikes were revving up outside, and I could hear Dad yelling at everyone to get out." She shook her head. "That's no way for a kid to live." Charlie reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "That life's behind you now. After tonight, you can go anywhere, be anyone you want." "I want to help people," Emma said firmly. "Maybe become a counselor, work with kids from rough backgrounds, turn all this pain into something good, you know?" Rick smiled in the darkness. "Your dad would have liked that. The real Tony, not the man he became." They drove in silence for a while, the stars brilliant overhead in the clear desert sky. Emma felt a strange peace settling over her. For the first time, she could see a future that wasn't defined by her past. The truck slowed as Rick turned onto an even narrower path. Ahead, a dark opening gaped in the rocky hillside, the entrance to an abandoned mine shaft. Rick killed the engine, and the desert silence rushed in around them. "This is it," Emma whispered, comparing the map one last time to the scene before them. The entrance was partially collapsed, old wooden supports rotting away at odd angles. A rusted sign, warning of danger, hung crooked on a post. Charlie pulled out flashlights from his pack, handing one to each of them. The beams looked weak against the absolute darkness of the mine entrance. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Dad used to say these old mines were full of ghosts," she said quietly. "I guess he was right, just not the kind he meant." Their flashlight beams danced across the mine shaft's crumbling walls as they made their way deeper inside. The air grew thick with dust and the musty smell of decades past. Emma led the way, her steps careful but determined on the uneven ground. "Watch your head," Rick warned as they ducked under a sagging support beam. "These old mines aren't exactly up to code." Charlie stayed close to Emma, ready to catch her if she stumbled. The tunnel twisted left, then right, before opening into a wider chamber. Emma's light swept across the space, catching on something that glinted in the darkness. "There!" She pointed to a stack of metal boxes tucked into a natural alcove. Her hands trembled as she approached them. The first box was heavy, its lid secured with a padlock. Rick produced a key from his pocket, the one Tony had given him. The lock clicked open. Emma lifted the lid slowly. Stacks of $100 bills filled the box, bound together with rubber bands. Her breath caught in her throat. This is what they've been fighting over? Just money? But the second box held more than cash. Documents spilled out, ledgers, photographs, letters, evidence of decades of criminal enterprise, names, dates, locations. The third box contained an arsenal of weapons, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth. "This could destroy the whole organization," Rick said quietly. "Your father kept records of everything." Emma picked up a handful of cash, letting it fall through her fingers. The money that had bought her father's soul, piece by piece. The fortune built on other people's misery. She could smell the musty paper, feel its weight, all the pain it represented. "We could burn it," she whispered. "All of it. The money, the guns, the proof." Her hand clenched around a stack of bills. "Just end it here." Charlie touched her arm gently. "Emma." She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "I know. We need it. To buy my freedom." She took a shaky breath. "To make sure you and Sophie stay safe." Rick helped them load the boxes into duffel bags. Emma insisted on carrying one herself, despite its weight. As they emerged from the mine into the cool desert night, she paused to look up at the stars. "Dad used to tell me the desert holds secrets better than any safe," she said. "I guess he was right about that, too." Back at the truck, Charlie pulled out his phone. The screen glowed bright in the darkness as he dialed Rusty's number. Emma stood close, listening to the rings. Rusty answered on the third ring. His voice crackled through the speaker. "This better be good news, Hayes." "We found it," Charlie said firmly. "All of it. The money, the weapons, Tony's records." A long pause. "Where?" "That's not how this works." Charlie's voice was steel. "We're offering you a deal. The entire stash in exchange for Emma's freedom. You cut all ties. She disappears, and you never come looking." "And if I refuse?" Emma stepped closer to the phone. "Then every document in these boxes goes to the FBI. Every name, every crime, every dirty deal. Is that what you want, Rusty?" Another pause, longer this time. They could hear Rusty's breathing, the sound of him weighing his options. "Meet me at the old quarry," he finally said. 1 hour. Bring everything." The line went dead. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Charlie squeezed her shoulder supportively. "You ready?" he asked. Emma looked at the duffel bags, then back at the mine entrance, the last piece of her father's legacy. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready to end this." The old quarry was a gaping wound in the earth, its steep walls casting long shadows in the moonlight. Charlie parked their truck behind a pile of weathered boulders, the engine ticking as it cooled. 3 motorcycles and a black SUV were already waiting. "Remember the plan," Rick whispered, adjusting the tiny recorder hidden in his jacket. "No matter what happens, we've got leverage." Emma clutched the duffel bags close, her knuckles white. Charlie stood protectively beside her as they walked toward the waiting group. Rusty emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 burly bikers. "Well, well," Rusty drawled, his eyes fixed on the bags. "The prodigal daughter returns." "Let's get this over with," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. Rusty gestured to one of his men. "Show me what you brought." Emma set the bags down and unzipped one, revealing stacks of cash and documents. Rusty's eyes gleamed as he leafed through the contents. "Looks like Daddy left quite a nest egg," he sneered. "But you're crazy if you think I'm letting you walk away with all this dirt on us." In one fluid motion, Rusty drew a gun. His men followed suit, weapons appearing from beneath leather jackets. "Hand it all over," Rusty demanded, "or this ends badly for everyone." Charlie stepped forward, positioning himself between Emma and the guns. "That's not happening, Rusty." Rick's calm voice cut through the tension. "You really want to do this, Red?" He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. "Everything you've said tonight, every threat, every admission, it's all recorded. One button, and it goes to every law enforcement agency in the state." Rusty's face twisted with rage. "You're bluffing!" Rick pressed play. Rusty's earlier words crackled through the speaker. "Bring everything, or the girl's dad and his kid won't make it through the night." "We've got hours of these," Rick said. "Every threat, every crime you've admitted to. You really want to risk it?" Rusty's gun hand wavered. His eyes darted between Rick and the bags, calculating. "You're dead," he snarled. "All of you. You think some recording's going to stop?" Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the quarry. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "You set us up!" Rusty raised his gun, finger tightening on the trigger. Charlie tackled Emma to the ground as shots rang out. Rick dove behind a boulder, drawing his own weapon. The air filled with shouts and the sound of approaching vehicles. "Police! Drop your weapons!" A spotlight blazed from a helicopter overhead. Squad cars poured into the quarry, boxing everyone in. Officers in tactical gear emerged with weapons drawn. Rusty looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. "It's over, Red," Rick called out. "Do the smart thing for once." For a moment, it seemed Rusty might shoot anyway. Then, with a curse, he dropped his gun. His men followed suit, raising their hands. Officers swarmed forward, securing weapons and slapping handcuffs on the bikers. Emma watched from behind Charlie as Rusty was led away, his face contorted with hatred. "You okay?" Charlie asked softly, helping Emma to her feet. She nodded, brushing dirt from her clothes. "Yeah, I think I finally am." They watched as officers collected the bags of evidence, cataloging everything. Rick spoke quietly with the detective in charge, explaining how he'd coordinated with the police to set up the sting. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery's well-kept grounds. Emma walked between the rows of headstones, a small silver locket clutched in her hand. Charlie waited respectfully by the iron gates, giving her space for this final goodbye. She found her father's grave easily, a simple marker with Anthony Snake Sullivan etched in cold granite. No flowers adorned it, no signs that anyone had visited. Emma knelt in the dewy grass, her fingers tracing the letters of his name. "I used to think you were invincible," she whispered. "The great Tony Sullivan, who everyone feared and respected." She opened the locket, looking at the old photo inside. A younger version of her father holding her as a toddler, both of them smiling. It was the only picture she had where he looked like a regular dad, not a gang leader. "I spent so long trying to understand why you chose that life over being my father, why the gang meant more to you than I did." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free." Emma placed the locket at the base of the headstone. The morning breeze rustled through nearby trees, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and early spring flowers. In the distance, a groundskeeper trimmed hedges, the quiet hum of his tools a reminder that life went on. "I'm going to build something different," she said. "Something good. Maybe that's the best way to honor the father you could have been." Standing up, Emma brushed grass from her jeans. She took one last look at the grave, then turned and walked away, each step lighter than the last. Charlie met her at the gates with a gentle smile. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, and meant it. "I really am." They drove to the bus station in comfortable silence. Emma had a small backpack of belongings and an envelope containing her new identity, arranged by witness protection after she helped bring down what remained of her father's criminal empire. The station was quiet this early, just a few sleepy travelers waiting for their buses. Charlie helped Emma check her ticket and find the right platform. "I can't thank you enough," Emma said, turning to face him. "For everything. You didn't have to help me that night, but you did. You risked everything for a stranger." Charlie shook his head. "You're not a stranger anymore. You're family." Emma's eyes welled up, but she smiled through the tears. "Tell Sophie I'll miss our breakfast chats, and that the secret ingredient in those pancakes really is cinnamon." Charlie laughed softly. "She'll be glad to finally know." His expression grew serious. "You take care of yourself, Emma, or whatever name you're going by now." "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Matthews, business major at Riverside Community College." She adjusted her backpack. "Sounds pretty normal, right?" "Sounds perfect." The bus pulled up, its air brakes hissing. Other passengers began boarding, stowing their luggage beneath. "This is it," Emma said. She hugged Charlie tightly. "Thank you for showing me what a real father looks like." Charlie squeezed her shoulder as they parted. "You've got my number if you ever need anything, even just to talk." Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She handed her ticket to the driver and climbed aboard, finding a window seat near the middle. As the bus pulled away, she watched Charlie standing on the platform until he disappeared from view, along with the last traces of Emma Sullivan's old life. The rhythmic tap of hammers filled the spring air as Charlie and Sophie worked together on their front porch. Charlie had been putting off repairs for years, but now seemed like the perfect time for a fresh start. Sophie, wearing her own tiny tool belt, handed him nails with solemn concentration. "Like this, Dad?" she asked, holding up a nail. "Perfect, sweetheart." Charlie smiled, remembering how just weeks ago this same porch had been crowded with threatening bikers. Now the only sounds were birds chirping and the distant hum of lawnmowers. Mrs. Peterson from next door approached, carrying a casserole dish. She'd been avoiding them since the incident, crossing the street whenever she saw Charlie coming. Today, though, she walked right up to the porch steps. "I brought you both some lunch," she said, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "And, well, I wanted to say I'm sorry. We all are." She gestured vaguely toward the other houses on their street. "The police told us everything about how you helped that poor girl escape from that awful gang." Charlie set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. That means a lot." "We should have known better," she continued. 20 years you've lived here, always helping everyone, fixing our cars for next to nothing." She shook her head. "Instead, we believed the worst." Sophie piped up, "Dad's a hero. He saved Emma." Mrs. Peterson smiled at Sophie. "Yes, he is, dear. Your father is a very brave man." More neighbors began appearing throughout the day. Mr. Johnson brought his power tools to help with the repairs. The Wilsons showed up with sandwiches and cold drinks. Even Charlie's boss stopped by, officially offering him his job back, though Charlie had already found better work at another garage. As the afternoon wore on, their small front yard became an impromptu gathering. Children played while adults worked and talked, the community coming together to heal old wounds. During a quiet moment, Charlie went inside to get more nails from the kitchen drawer. As he rummaged through it, his hand brushed against an envelope he'd forgotten about. It was from Marla, Emma's letter. He sat down at the kitchen table and carefully opened it. Emma's neat handwriting filled the page. Dear Charlie, if you're reading this, I hope it means everything worked out okay. I'm writing this letter at Marla's safe house, not knowing if I'll make it through what comes next. But even if I don't, I needed you to know what you did for me. That night when you opened your door to a stranger in the rain, you did more than offer shelter. You showed me that good people still exist, that someone could look at me and see more than just Tony Sullivan's daughter. You and Sophie gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. A chance to believe in myself again. Every morning when Sophie insisted I join your breakfast routine, every time you defended me, even though it put you in danger, you were teaching me what family really means. I don't know what my future holds, but I know it's brighter because of you. Whatever happens, please know that you changed my life. You showed me that it's never too late to start over, that our past doesn't have to define us. Thank you for being the father figure I needed when I was most lost. With love and gratitude, Emma. Charlie wiped his eyes and carefully folded the letter back into its envelope. Through the window, he could see Sophie showing the other kids her tool belt, proudly explaining how she was helping fix up their house. The phone rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Charlie was helping Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table when he saw the familiar number light up on his screen. "Emma?" he answered, his face brightening. "Charlie," Emma's voice came through, filled with excitement. "I got in. I just got the acceptance letter from the nursing program." Charlie's heart swelled with pride. He could picture Emma in her small dorm room, probably surrounded by textbooks and study notes. She'd been working so hard for this moment, taking prerequisites while working part-time at a local pharmacy. "That's wonderful news." Charlie's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, trying to hide how emotional he felt. "I never doubted you for a second." Sophie perked up at the mention of Emma's name. "Is that Emma? Can I talk to her?" "Please, Dad?" Charlie handed the phone to his daughter, watching as Sophie's face lit up. The two had maintained their special bond despite the distance, with Sophie treating Emma like the big sister she never had. "Emma, did you really get in? That's so cool." Sophie bounced in her chair. "When you become a nurse, can I come visit you at the hospital? I want to see you in your uniform." Charlie listened to their conversation, his vision blurring with unexpected tears. I remembered that terrified girl who had shown up on his doorstep during the storm, how lost she had seemed. Now, barely 2 years later, she was pursuing her dreams, building a new life far from the shadows of her past. "Dad's crying," Sophie announced matter-of-factly into the phone, making Charlie quickly wipe his eyes. "I am not," he protested, but he could hear Emma's gentle laugh through the speaker. "It's okay, Charlie," Emma said when Sophie handed the phone back. "I'm kind of crying too." Charlie walked to the window, looking out at the street where, not long ago, dozens of motorcycles had lined the curb. Now there were just kids riding their bikes and neighbors walking their dogs. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. You've worked so hard for this." "I couldn't have done it without you," Emma's voice was soft. "You showed me I was worth more than my father's legacy. You gave me a chance when nobody else would." Charlie had to take a deep breath before he could speak. "You did all the hard work yourself. You're the one who chose to change your life." "Maybe," Emma said, "but sometimes people need someone to believe in them first." After they hung up, Charlie stepped out onto the rebuilt front porch. The spring air was warm, and the town spread out before him looked different somehow. The same houses lined the same streets, but everything felt lighter, more hopeful. He thought about Emma, studying late into the night to ace her prerequisites. He thought about Sophie, who had grown more compassionate and understanding after their experience. He even thought about Rick, who now ran a program helping young people leave gang life behind. The sun was setting over the town, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. Charlie sat in one of the new porch chairs, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. All the chaos and fear from those days seemed like a distant memory now. In its place was something better, the knowledge that sometimes opening your door to someone in need could change not just their life, but your own. The town looked exactly as it always had, but Charlie saw it with new eyes. Every house held stories of people trying their best, making mistakes, helping each other, and starting over. He had found his purpose in that simple truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was just be there for someone else. The late summer breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine across Charlie's front porch. He sat in his favorite chair, the wood still warm from the setting sun, while Sophie sprawled on the porch steps, her math homework forgotten beside her. The evening was peaceful, the kind of peaceful that had once seemed impossible during those dark days when bikers filled their street. Charlie watched his daughter as she traced patterns in the air with her finger, following the path of lightning bugs that had started to emerge in the twilight. At 10 years old now, Sophie carried herself with a quiet confidence that made his heart ache with pride. The events of 2 years ago had changed her, but not in the ways he'd feared. Instead of making her fearful, the experience had given her a deeper understanding of the world and the importance of helping others. "Dad?" Sophie's voice broke through his thoughts. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Emma hadn't knocked on our door that night?" Charlie shifted in his chair, considering the question. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on what-ifs." "I'm glad she did," Sophie said firmly, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Even with all the scary stuff that happened after." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. Charlie remembered countless evenings spent watching this same view, but with fear knotting his stomach as he searched the streets for signs of trouble. Now the only sounds were crickets chirping and children playing a few houses down. "Me too, sweetheart," he replied softly. "Sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing." Sophie nodded, wise beyond her years. "Like when you told me we help people who need it, even when it's hard?" "Exactly like that." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened. The street lights began to flicker on, one by one, creating pools of warm light along their quiet street. Charlie thought about how much had changed since that stormy night, not just in their lives, but in the town itself. The neighbors who had once whispered and stared now smiled and waved, some even admitting they wished they'd had the courage to help. Sophie suddenly sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on the street. "Dad, look!" A car was turning onto their street, its headlights sweeping across the houses. Charlie recognized the vehicle immediately, a sensible blue sedan that Emma had bought with her first real paycheck from the pharmacy. His heart warmed at the sight. The car pulled up in front of their house, and Sophie was already on her feet, bouncing with excitement. Through the windshield, Charlie could see Emma's bright smile as she gathered something from the passenger seat, probably the homemade cookies she'd promised to bring for their dinner together. Charlie stood up, his movements unhurried but purposeful. He reached for the porch light switch, the same one he'd flipped on that stormy night when a scared teenager had stood shivering on his doorstep. The warm glow spilled down the steps, illuminating Emma's path as she stepped out of her car. "We're up here," Sophie called out, waving enthusiastically. Charlie's hand lingered on the light switch for a moment. He thought about paths and choices, about doors opening and closing, about the power of a simple porch light to guide someone home. Emma looked up at them, her nursing textbook tucked under one arm, cookies balanced in her other hand, and Charlie saw in her confident stride how far she'd come from that rain-soaked night. He'd left the porch light on for her then. He always would. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.